And Saturday night made it 100 days since Hamas's major attack on the state of Israel, and the event was commemorated by thousands of people whose thoughts and prayers were for the 130 hostages abducted by the militant group and still being held in Gaza. Thousands of Israelis took to the streets of Tel Aviv to call for the release of the hostages. Hamas launched an unprecedented attack on southern Israel on October 7, killing approximately 1,200 people, mostly civilians, and kidnapping over 200, according to Israeli officials.
Thousands of Israelis took to the streets of Tel Aviv on Saturday evening, calling for the release of all captives held in the Gaza Strip. Many protesters lit candles in memory of the Israelis who have lost their lives since the October 7 attacks and those still being held captive by Hamas.
We want to be protected. We deserve to be protected. We deserve a government that will protect us. The war is not going to solve our problems. We have to start imagining something else. We've been in war after war. We have to end the cycle of violence.
Israel declared war on Hamas and a complete siege of Gaza with a large-scale campaign of airstrikes, which Palestinian officials reported had killed over 1,500 people in the first week and many thousands more since. A ground incursion began at the end of the third, with Israeli leaders vowing to wipe out Hamas. A 7-day truce in late November saw Hamas release over 100 people, including 86 Israeli women and children, while Israel freed around 240 Palestinians from Israeli jails. Israeli officials claim that around 136 people remain in captivity in Gaza. U.S. Ambassador to Israel Jacob Lowe attended the rally, but he promised protesters the return of all hostages.
I stand here with you and reaffirm the pledge that I've made to family members of those who are held hostage. We will not stop working to bring them home.
Demonstrators also call for the resignation of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But just as Israelis mourn their dead and call for the release of captives, there were protests against Israel in other parts of the world. Many pro-Palestinian demonstrators flooded the streets of London on Saturday, participating in the National March for Palestine. They carried the Palestinian flags and banners and chanted, "Be free, Palestine." The march aimed to draw attention to the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas, which has entered its fourth month. The UK's stance on the conflict has been a subject of discussion, with last month's abstention from a UN General Assembly resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire. However, the UK supported a subsequent Security Council resolution on humanitarian aid and measures to create conditions for a cessation of hostilities, emphasizing the commitment to a sustainable ceasefire.
Meanwhile, as mentioned, hundreds of protesters gathered outside the United States consulate in Johannesburg over the weekend, demanding action be taken to end the ongoing war in Gaza. Hamas militants entered Israel from the Gaza Strip on October 7 and killed about 1,400 people, mostly civilians. They took over 200 hostages from Israel to the Gaza Strip. Since then, the Israeli Defense Force has killed over 24,000 people in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Some are now calling for South Africa to stop doing business with Israel. Our South Africa correspondent Innocent Somoza reports.
Protesters gathered for the Global Day of Action in support of Palestine, holding signs, waving flags, and sharing personal stories of the impact they believe the conflict has on Palestinian lives.
My house was destroyed. My car was destroyed. And I have been displaced, as I said, for 4 times. I moved from a remote neighborhood which was flattened to the ground. It was flattened to the ground. People were left under the rubble for weeks.
Chants of Free Palestine, to the river, to the sea, echo through the air as demonstrators express their discontent over what they perceive as Israel's USA-funded genocide.
So this is it's not just a mistake, their propaganda. It is a science, a crafted science of manufacturing lies, false information, false capitalizing on Jewish mourning, on our ancestors who passed in the Holocaust. They are now using that as a pretext for genocide of a similar fashion. We say no. So it's part of a set of manufactured lies aimed to discredit the remarkable legal work of the South African legal team.
Free Palestine!
Their genocide, their intent for genocide, the speech of their leaders has been laid bare for the entire world to see. They've only been talking genocide and they've been carrying out genocide. They've bombed and killed more than 23,000 Palestinians. They've destroyed hospitals, they've destroyed schools. There's been intent in every public official, Israeli public official who's spoken. There has been intent for genocide, which has been carried out by the Israeli forces on the ground.
Some locals want South Africa to cut diplomatic ties with Israel.
I mean, let's look at the investment. In actual fact, the investment that have come from Israel at the recent time, have been very destructive. I, for one, as a president of the union, we had a 6-month strike demanding a divestment of an Israeli company, Milko, that operates in a Jewish settlement on a Palestinian land. That company had taken over Clover, the biggest dairy manufacturer or manufacturer of dairy products in this country. That investment, or so-called investment, it led to a closure of 6 factories. It led to dismissal of thousands of workers.
Protesters here are telling me that they are proud of South Africa's legal team for taking up the case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. Some are of the view that Israel does not have a history but a criminal record. But we now understand and know that Israel has vehemently denied all the allegations. From Johannesburg, South Africa, outside the U.S. Consulate, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
And the protests against Israel's offensive on Gaza extended to Pakistan, where thousands joined the Gaza Million March. Protesters marched with Palestinian flags and placards showing support for Palestine. Protesters condemned the Israeli military offensive in Gaza, calling on Muslim leaders to unite in support of the Palestinian people, while calling for a boycott of Israeli products. Hamas has been designated as a terrorist organization by Israel and some of its closest allies, such as the U.S. and the EU. And joining us now is expert in international relations theory at the Lagos State University and founding member of the Association of Foreign Relations Professionals of Nigeria, Dr. Dapo Thomas. He joins us from Ojo, Lagos. Dr. Thomas, welcome to the program and great to have you. Let me just start with my first question. 100 days since the Hamas attack, and it feels like it's been a year, given the intensity of Israel's attacks on Gaza. What should be the points for reflection as pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian groups commemorate the event of that day?
Well, at this point, I subscribe to the view, which is very prevailing, which is the prevailing view, that there should be a truce or a ceasefire at this particular point in time. The only snag there is that for Israel, there's going to be a kind of psychological problem for the fact that they have stated 2 objectives for this war, and I do not think that they have achieved any. One, the destruction of Hamas, the decapacitation of Hamas structure, and then the second one is the release of all the hostages. Looking into that, it may be very difficult to convince Israel to have a ceasefire. But for Hamas, yes, it can be done. However, I want Israel to, having been able to destroy considerably, or to some extent, substantial structure of Hamas in in Gaza. I want to believe that they should have a kind of ceasefire when they should reflect and then they should discuss the release of the hostages, and then we move on from there to discuss or negotiate peace in Gaza. But for now, my only problem is that I do not think that Israel is ready to engage or to negotiate any kind of peace, because the two objectives for the war have not been achieved. So that's the problem I'm having with the call for the end of the war.
And Dr. Thomas, the BBC put out this article of young female conscripts who noticed unusual events and happenings, preparations for the attack in the bordering towns months before the actual attack happened. Now, they passed this information on to higher-ranking officers, but couldn't press any further. The Israeli forces are said to be one of the most advanced, as we know, in the world. Given this new information, Dr. Thomas, can we really say Israel was unaware of the impending attacks?
There are two issues to this, which possibly caused or distracted the Israeli authorities from focusing on national security as it concerned external aggression. In the first instance, the first case is that, one, when you talk of security intelligence, when you talk of intel, you have problem because you receive some of these signals every day, some of these reports every day, and then you'll be on alert every day, 24/7. But at this particular point in time, I was thinking that what actually caused this distraction were the domestic problems that were happening in Israel concerning the power to overrule, concerning the power being given to the legislature to overrule Supreme Court. And this caused a serious national crisis that even Netanyahu was unable to curtail. And as a result of that, people were distracted. The government was distracted. So they were busy on how to achieve how to achieve their own interest at the domestic level. And that was exactly what gave the Hamas the opportunity to start working. They probably have been working towards a time that there will be this kind of distraction, and they got the opportunity, and that was why they capitalized on that. So it's not that the authorities did not want to do anything about the intel. It's possible that they were distracted and they felt that, look, this personal interest or political interest is even more than whatever. And they now even overestimated the capacity of Hamas to break into their fence, because of his extensive nature.
So you think that part of it was that they were...
While it happens.
So you think that a part of it was that they didn't expect that Hamas would be able to make such headway. I want to ask you,
even if they expected, they were. The political crisis within their state had distracted them. So even if they expected, they just decided to place their own personal political interest above the national interest. That was exactly what happened. Why they did not do anything about the intel.
And I want to discuss a little bit the protests, Dr. Thomas. We've seen more pro-Palestinian demonstrations, people calling for Palestine to be freed, calling for a ceasefire. We are reminded that scores of people have died in this war, and many more will die. As the war carries on, Israel is fully implementing a ground offensive. Should Israel heed another ceasefire, given the gravity of the situation on the ground?
Like I said earlier, it's not possible, because they have the information at their disposal as to the percentage of Hamas's military structure, which they had been able to destroy. Their intention is to make sure that Hamas is disabled completely, and then it does not have or possess the power or the capacity or the capability rather to launch that kind of aggression on Israel again. That's on the part of Israel. Then again, it's not even possible for Hamas itself to say that they want to stop, because this is more like a proxy war, or what I would call errand war, is you can see the hands of Iran behind this. And they are dictating what measures or what actions or what decisions Hamas is to take. So it is a very problematic thing. It's a very problematic thing, and I believe that the two of them will have to come together. But I don't see Hamas also giving into whatever Israel is demanding or the conditions Israel is stating, for as long as Iran is still supplying them the necessary armaments to continue with the war, or for as long as Iran is still telling them that no, do not give in. Make sure you continue the war. We will continue to supply everything that you need.
So you're claiming that Iran is actually operating Hamas wholly or partially? I mean,
it is an open secret that it is Iran that is funding the Houthis in Yemen. It is Hamas. I mean, it is Iran that is funding the Hezbollah in Lebanon. It is Iran that is funding Hamas in Gaza. So they are not even hiding it. They are not hiding it. They are the backers. They are the backers. They are the people funding these terrorist organizations. And for as long as Iran still tells them that they should not back down, then there is nothing anybody can do.
And Dr. Thomas,
nothing anybody can do. Yes.
You know, over the last few weeks, we saw Israel extend its offensive to Hezbollah in Lebanon, even seeking Hamas militant leaders in the country. What should be the statute of limitations in this war against Hamas?
There is no statute of limitation when it comes to terrorist activities. You don't dictate. It is the position or the direction of the war is at the at the instance of the person that is provoked. Don't forget that this war was caused by an act of provocation and aggression against Israel. So Israel possesses the capacity or the ability to now dictate the direction of the war. So if anywhere Israel feels that the threat to its national security or sovereignty is coming from, they have the right, you know, to confront such a threat.
And what do you say about
coming from Lebanon? The threat is coming from Lebanon, from the Hezbollah, and then they feel that look, they have to fight all this from all the up fronts, that where these things are coming from Yemen, from Lebanon, and from Gaza.
So what do you say about people that say that the initial attack wasn't on October 7th? There's a context involved. It wasn't just an attack on the 7th.
You cannot, in this kind of situation, there is the need for isolating the particular immediate cause, and that is October 7th. There is no way this kind of conflict has been there since 1947-48, when Israel came into existence. So, but in this instance, you are looking at the immediate cause, not the remote causes. You are looking at the immediate cause, and the immediate cause was October 7th. So why should we decide to ignore, or why should we now discountenance what happened on October 7th? That was the extent. That was the greatest provocation that Israel had ever faced since its establishment in 1947.
Dr. Thomas, at the close of last week, South Africa's petition to the International Court of Justice accusing Israel of genocide was certainly heard. What are your thoughts on this? Would you consider this war genocide?
It's obviously not a genocide. Obviously not a genocide. Genocide is defined by whatever, we go by the definition given to genocide according to the Nuremberg trials between 1945 and 1946 in Germany. And then you also go by the 1948 Genocide Convention of the United Nations. So when you look at the context, when you look at the definition, you will discover that by no means can we say that this is genocide. This is an act of provocation, and there is no intention to completely wipe off the Palestinians from Gaza. There is no intention, or the extent, the rate, or this kind of the high percentage of casualties that we are having in Gaza is as a result of the fact that the Hamas, number one, is the government. And as a result of that, it has the ability, it has the capacity to use civilian structures and infrastructure to establish tunnels and then start attacking from there and start building military infrastructure underneath civilian structures. And when this happens, there is no way you get to the tunnel without destroying the surface. So the Israelis definitely will have to, first of all, dismantle what is on the tunnel before they are able to deal with the tunnel, all the tunnels over there. So now when you build tunnels underneath hospitals, I mean, we have evidence. It's not a case of people of, just saying that, oh, it is not true. We have seen there is, I mean, these days, the technology is so sophisticated that we can establish what is true and what is wrong, what is not true. So we have seen considerable numbers of tunnels being established under schools, being established under hospitals. So when this happens, and then civilians are there, students are in school, and then you have casualties or you have patients in the hospitals. So when there is going to be any kind of attack, war is not a situation where you are very considerate about lives. That's my position on, military. They don't even have anything. All they want to do is to achieve their own objective. And what is the objective? To destroy Hamas's structure. And that is exactly what they are doing. Their intention is not to go out for civilians. It's to destroy, and in the process...
I mean, if you look at the actions, there's been 24,000 civilians killed, and we're not quite sure about the... Yes. But I mean, the truth... It's true that we have a lot of technology to help us identify the truth much better, but there seems to be some unsureness on both sides and some misinformation. I appreciate you so very much, Dr. Dapo Thomas, for joining us from Ojo, Lagos. Great talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
And the UK's Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has been answering questions from lawmakers about the recent airstrikes launched on Houthi rebels in Yemen, alongside the United States, as the UN questions their legitimacy. Mr. Sunak says the UK will not hesitate to take further action against the Houthis to protect itself in the Red Sea. This comes after the US and the UK launched joint strikes at Houthi sites in Yemen, as the Iran-backed rebel group has been attacking cargo ships since November. The Houthis are a political and military group in control of a large part of Yemen and are also key allies of Hamas in Gaza. They say they have been targeting ships which are Israeli-owned or which are delivering goods there, but many have no connections with Israel. Earlier, a spokesperson for the UN Secretary-General Stéphane Dujarric said Mr. Antonio Guterres noted the airstrikes by the US and UK were done with the support of other countries, and called for respect of the Security Council Resolution 2722.
Noting that airstrikes were launched yesterday across multiple parts of Yemen by the United States and the United Kingdom, and with the support of other countries, the Secretary General underscores that Security Council Resolution 2722 must be fully respected in its entirety. The Secretary General reiterates that attacks against international shipping in the Red Sea are not acceptable, and they endanger the safety and security of global supply chains and have a negative impact on the economic and humanitarian situation around the world. The Security Council demands in that resolution 2722 that Houthis immediately cease all such attacks on commercial shipping. This resolution must be fully respected. The Secretary General calls upon all member states defending their vessels from attacks to do so in accordance with international law as stipulated in the resolution. The Secretary General further calls on all parties involved not to escalate even more the situation in the interest of peace and stability in the Red Sea and the wider region. Furthermore, the Secretary General stresses the need to avoid acts that could further worsen the situation in Yemen itself. He calls for every effort to be made to ensure that Yemen pursues a path of peace and that the work undertaken thus far to end the conflict in Yemen should not be lost.
More from the UN, as the Assistant Secretary General Khaled Khiari also reiterated Mr. Antonio Guterres' call on all parties involved in the airstrikes not to escalate the situation in the region, in the interest of peace and stability in the Red Sea and the wider region. According to the Houthis, the latest airstrikes led by the U.S. and the U.K. resulted in the deaths of 5 people and injury to 6 fighters.
The Secretary General called upon all parties involved not to escalate even more the situation in the interest of peace and stability in the Red Sea and the wider region. All concerned parties must do their utmost to avoid further escalation, reduce tensions, and exercise restraint. We are witnessing a cycle of violence that risks grave political, security, economic, and humanitarian repercussions in Yemen and the region. Recent humanitarian improvements in the country are fragile and could easily be reversed if there are further incidents, while progress on reaching a political settlement to end the war in Yemen could also be undermined, leaving the people of Yemen facing the impact of continued conflict. We also reaffirm the importance of ensuring the safety and security of maritime navigation in the region, as emphasized in the Resolution 2722 of this Council. In that regard, we also call for the immediate release of the Galaxy Leader, which was seized by the Houthis on 19 November, and the release of her crew.
And in a separate development, the United States is demanding that Iran immediately release a ship it seized off the coast of Oman. Comments by the U.S. State Department spokesperson Vedant Patel comes after the Iranian Navy said it seized the St. Nicholas, a Greek-owned vessel flying the Marshall Islands flag, as a retaliation for the seizure of 980,000 barrels of crude oil in September. The U.S. claimed at the time that this oil was being sold by Iran's Revolutionary Guards to China. The State Department spokesperson also commented on the situation in Gaza, in particular the hearings on South Africa's lawsuit against Israel, which is accused of violating the Genocide Convention in the Gaza Strip.
The Iranian government must immediately release the ship and its crew. This unlawful seizure of a commercial vessel is just the latest behavior by Iran, or enabled by Iran, aimed at disrupting international commerce. We believe this kind of action will simply add uncertainty for commercial shipping and for regional and global economies. Iran and Iran-abled provocative actions like this are a menace to the global economy, and it must cease. We in the United States will continue to work to deter and confront the full range of Iran's concerning and destabilizing behaviors. The allegations that Israel is committing genocide are unfounded. Those who are violently attacking Israel, who continue to openly call for Israel's annihilation and the mass murder of Jews. Genocide is one of the most heinous acts any entity or individual can commit, and such an allegation should only be made with the greatest of care. We have made clear to any country in which we have this kind of security relationship with that international human rights must be respected and followed, and this is no international human law, needs to be followed, and this of course is this case is no different, and we've made that clear to the Israelis that again steps need to be taken as often and as frequently and as strongly as possible to minimize this conflict's impact. Palestinian civilians must be able to return to their homes when they choose to return. Full stop. And we've been clear that all hostages must be released immediately, and that the issue of their release should not be linked to any other issues. We've been quite clear about that.